Cool. So the Windsor Knot came out right at the beginning of lockdown, or no, towards the end of which lockdown did it come out?
It actually came out at the end of October, so kind
So
of
was that?
between lockdowns, I think. I'm kind of losing track of my lockdowns,
I
but
know.
it got picked up by a publisher at the beginning of the first lockdown.
Yes, yes. So if folks aren't aware, I will give you a brief synopsis. So the morning after a dinner party at Windsor Castle, 89-year-old Queen Elizabeth is shocked to discover that one of her guests has been found murdered in his room with a rope around his neck. When the police begin to suspect her loyal servants, Her Majesty knows they are looking in the wrong place, for the Queen has been living an extraordinary double life since her coronation. Away from the public eye, she has a brilliant knack for solving crimes. While her household's happiness is on the line, her secret must not get out. Can the Queen and her trusted secretary Rosie catch the killer without getting caught themselves? So I thought that was just a really great premise. When I read that, that was it was exciting because, like, I don't know, the royals are such an exciting bunch of people, and then adding this fun little element of them being of the Queen herself being this secret detective along the way is I found it quite exciting. So how did you come to choose the Queen as your detective for this series?
Well, I was originally trying to write about a completely different detective. And it was a story that had been building in my head for years and years. And he was a billionaire cyborg art detective set about 10 years in the future. So a bit like Altered Carbon meets Dorothy Sayers kind of thing. And it wasn't working. And I found that if I tried to describe it to people, it was just too complicated. Anyway, I was driving up to a writing retreat to write it. And I was thinking about The Crown, as you do, and it was season 2. And there was a tiny little scene in The Crown where the Queen put a model soldier back in the wrong place on a battlefield. And I just thought, do you know what? She wouldn't do that. I could see, it was funny, so I could see why they put it in. But I just thought, she knows battles. She's a really good military historian. My father has met her many times. He's a military historian. She knows it's rude to move people's soldiers around on their battlefields. And if anything, she would put the soldier back in a better place than where he was before. And then I got to thinking, well, you know, she's got areas of expertise. She doesn't know everything about everything, but certain things she knows a hell of a lot about. So, you know, horse racing, her own stuff, her collections, her palaces, constitutional history, she's an expert on. And so she's got that. And then I thought, and she sees the world in a way that nobody ever sees it, because everyone's always looking at her. I mean, you know, even if she was surrounded by presidents, they would still be looking at her. And so she's looking out. So it's as if there's this kind of bright spotlight on her, but she can just sort of see into the gloom. And at that point I was thinking, oh my goodness, that would give her such an interesting perspective. What if she saw something that nobody else spotted? And she's got a really good eye for detail in real life, and she's got a great memory. And my parents would say, you know, if she'd met you 20 years before, I mean, she'd be reminded by her staff, but nevertheless, you could see when you were chatting to her that she could genuinely dredge this meeting up again. So I just found that my cyborg art detective was just not as interesting as this one. And she'd done all my world building for me, bless her heart, you know, she's lived a really long life. So a huge amount of the stress was taken out. It's just like, it's all there, it's all ready to go.
Yep, that makes total sense. So this might be I'll ask a question anyway. So what was it like having your this debut come out in the midst of this pandemic?
Okay, it's been so weird for all of us, and it has been ultra weird for me, can I say, because it was the dream come true, you know, the author dream that we all have, where you know, it goes to auction in America and it goes to auction in France, and people are getting really excited about it, and your email inbox is kind of filling up and your agent is just skipping with glee. Was that in February? I didn't have an agent this time last year, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I got my agent the last day of January. I think I met him almost exactly a year ago.
Wow.
And he just moved fast, and that's one of the reasons why I liked him so much. I was going to self-publish. That was the plan,
right.
Because I was fed up with being a mid-list writer. And anyway, and he just thought that I might be able to sort of do better than that with this series, because it was just such an easy concept to explain to people.
Yes.
And so that was February, sort of late January, February, and then it went to auction in America, and it got stupid. Just the dream that we all have. I mean, I spent 2 days on the phone to 6 editors in New York, and it was just amazing. And as the deal was signed, lockdown came into place. So I didn't meet anybody, where there were no physical celebrations. It was all extremely scary, but my life had changed. And it's carried on being super weird, the best and the worst, just ever since then, really.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's impressive. I'm actually I'm blown away when you say that this time a year ago you didn't have an agent, and then he moved that quick. That is
awesome.
That is incredible. Well done to you both, because I mean the book is great. It needed to be picked up quick.
Well, I've been lucky also. I mean, with all of this, it's a funny book, and it creates this kind of golden age of crime kind of world where there's an intelligent, ethical woman in charge, and everything will be okay. And that's what they wanted in France and Germany, and very definitely America. So it's helped me a lot, I think. I mean, I think everybody will be finding there'll be lots of cozy crime coming out in the next year or so, because and being sold really successfully, because Death in Paradise is doing really well. That's kind of what people need just now as an escape. Yes,
they want the escapist crime, which this definitely is that. It's not gritty, but it's intriguing, and it pulls you along nicely. What was it like getting into the Queen's head? Because when I listened to the audiobook of this back when you originally mentioned that Samantha Bond was the one who was the narrator, and what was so cool was it really felt like you were channeling the Queen in the way she was narrating the story. How did you do that?
Well, I spent a year getting it wrong, I would say. That's how I generally do things. I'm very good at that. Sometimes it's 4 years, but this time it was a year. I couldn't do it to start with. I knew that if done well, the idea would work, because the Queen just does all the work for you in selling a book. And I didn't want to do it badly. And for a year, I really struggled with point of view. Should it be her point of view? Should it be the sidekick's point of view? And I didn't intend for it to be funny. I wanted it to be as accurate as possible, really. And then I followed her for over 40 years, since I was 11, because I was interested in her clothes to start with. And I know a lot about her, because it's just, once you know a lot about something, every time you see another detail, it sticks.
Yes.
So it wasn't hard from that point of view, but it just, after a year of trying, there was one day, and many of my books have come this way, there was one day I was writing a scene that was supposed to be like 30 pages in. And she was sitting on her pony, she'd been for a ride, and she was looking up at Windsor Castle, and she was just reflecting on her life. And I felt, oh my goodness, that it's coming. And then I did another scene, which is the one I read last time, with her and Prince Philip together.
Yes.
And I just thought, I can do this. It's kind of based on relatives of mine, old relatives who've been married for years and years and years, sort of who drive each other mad, but they're still really fond of each other. I found that was relatively easy to get my head into, and it was fun. So it was a combination of being almost impossible followed by very easy.
Yes, you did a very good job at channeling them. I found impressive. Bonnie is saying in the chat that she loves Prince Philip in the book. He is hilarious.
He's not very polite. I love it. And whenever he talks to her, it's always to say, "My God, you look ghastly," or something like that. She just puts up with it. She's used to it.
Yes. So what's interesting is, so the Queen is the main character, but then you have this cool sidekick of Rosie. And she's an interesting spin on a Watson-like figure. So I want to know a bit about Rosie and how you came to create her, and how did you kind of envision the Queen and Rosie's relationship evolving, and not just potentially beyond this book?
Well, so yeah, I knew I wanted there to be a sidekick, and I knew I needed that to be someone that the reader could relate to more, because we also know the Queen, but I'd say relate to her, not necessarily so much. I knew I was going to set the book in reasonable contemporary times, and it ended up being 2016. And I have taught writing a lot, and usually a third of my writing students are women of colour, I would say. And I live in Tooting, and so I wanted her to be a woman of colour. And I made her assistant private secretary to the Queen, because that's the job that I interviewed for back in the late 90s. So I ended up with this Nigerian Londoner. She's 30, which is about the age I was when I interviewed. And she's a decorated war veteran, which I am totally not. And she's worked for a bank. And she's kind of tall and sexy, and she's a very aspirational character for me. But she's actually based more than anything on Archie Goodwin from the Nero Wolfe books by Rex Stout. Which might seem a bit weird, but Nero Wolfe hardly ever goes outside his brownstone in Manhattan. And he's a busy, on his top floor looking after his orchids, and he can't be bothered to go out. And the Queen, on the whole, couldn't go out to solve the murder. So she needed a leg woman to go off and do all the hard work. And Archie, you often see those stories through Archie's eyes, and I've always adored him. So actually, she's a Black female Archie Goodwin.
Okay, no, it's cool. And yeah, how do you envision? Do you have an idea where kind of what's going to happen with them in the future?
Well, there are 4 books in this quadrilogy. I sold 3 to America, so I don't know whether America will get the last one, but I sold 5 in the UK, so they will.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So my plan is to do quadrilogies going back in time. So 4 set around 2016-17, and then 4 set in the kind of 80s, 90s, I think, and then back.
Okay.
And so Rosie will be in the first 4, and her. So in book 1, she doesn't know why on earth the Queen is asking her to do all these weird things and do them secretly, and she has to work out, because the Queen's not going to tell her. She has to work out what the hell is going on, and she finds out that there is a long tradition of assistant private secretaries, women who help the Queen solve crimes and never tell anybody. So it's a little bit like a sort of mini Bletchley Park for the Queen, and she's now joined that club. And in book 2, that's set at Buckingham Palace, and she always has some kind of physical work that she's got to do. There's always some physical peril. But book 4 is what I'm working towards, because so 1 is funny, and I come across as very royalist as a writer, and I'm not actually completely royalist. I'm very pro Elizabeth II, but you put Prince Andrew in, and suddenly I'm not a royalist anymore. But you get to 2017, and I've deliberately set it this way so that it's summer, and Rosie was born in Peckham, but she grew up in Notting Hill, and the Grenfell Tower fire has just happened, and Rosie knew a lot of those people, and she is really questioning why she should stay involved with the establishment, given the way that it has treated her people. And so she goes up to Balmoral, and then it becomes a kind of 39 Steps meets Day of the Jackal kind of thing. And Rosie has to put all her military training to good use, while wondering whether that she should even be doing that. So that's where I'm going with that. So it'll end up in a very different place from where it started.
That's going to be really exciting to get to. So you've kind of touched a little bit upon this, but I'm interested in your just general research process. Whether that's how do you follow and keep up with the royals? Are you visiting places, interviewing people? What's that like?
It's a mixture of stuff. So absolutely visiting places. And so it started with my now 14-year-old was about 7, and he missed a school trip to Windsor Castle, and because he was ill, and so I took him as a concerned parent. So we did a trip on our own, and I was just losing interest because the castle is a castle. And then we got to a dining room, and the guide said, oh, this is where they hold the dine and sleeps, and this is where they have the dinner. And somebody said, what's the dine and sleep? And it turned out that the Queen invites 20 people to dinner, and she can choose whoever she likes, and they always say yes. And you go and you have a lovely dinner, and there's an entertainment, and then you sleep over and have breakfast there the following morning. And I just thought, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this so badly. I want to sleep in the Queen's house and wake up the next morning. And I want to be sitting next to David Attenborough at dinner.
That's all right.
And I looked it up the next day, and the one that I happened to find on Google was Tim Peake and Delia Smith and various ambassadors and other people. And I just thought, that is so random. Yes. So those visits kind of inspire weird and wonderful things that I'm not expecting. And then through my family, we know various people, because the army provides a lot of royal courtiers one way or another. So we know various people who've worked for various members of the household. They don't at the moment, but you know, they did in years gone by. So I can talk to them. They're all, and it's really lovely, they're all really loyal. So they're not like, oh God, let me tell you about this horrible thing that happened. It's not particularly gossipy. There was a funny story about a doggy that I can't really tell, but usually it's just little practical details about what they're like when you meet them, which is tends to be doing everything they possibly can to put you at ease, basically. I get lovely details. There was my favorite one, I think, was the Queen knighted somebody that she was very, very fond of, and it was a private ceremony in Windsor Castle by firelight, and it was just Princess Margaret holding the sword and the Queen taking it off her sister, and I love that. I love that you can. I mean, you know, that's the thing. Being an expert on constitutional history, she knows what she can and can't do, and if she can do it, she does it.
Exactly. Well, hopefully one day you will find yourself at Windsor Castle with 20 other people having dinner, and then waking up the next morning.
That'd be so lovely. But I also get a lot of details out of Horse and Hound. I mean, you know Hugh Grant in Notting Hill. I was saying he was from Horse and Hound. Well, it's really handy. And I go back over the years, and they're all these lovely articles. So there's a detail in the book, I'm sure you noticed, where the Queen gets a £50 voucher from Tesco, and she's really excited. Got that from Horse and Hound.
Now, what I'm interested in as well is the kind of how we blend fact and fiction together. So first, what boundaries do you give yourself when you're writing fiction about factual events and real life characters?
Yeah, interesting. Before I answer, I'm just going to say, wow, Gaynor has had Prince Philip beef brandy fumes on her, and that is just so cool. I have to find out more about this later. For me, it's at the moment, it's quite straightforward. So when I'm writing about real things that happened, I try and be as authentic as I can. And what I discovered, my initial plan with the book was just make a whole bunch of stuff up. But then I discovered that all the court circulars from years gone by are online now. So I can find out everything the Queen did when she did something official every day. And I thought, well, I'll just sling a few of those in for color. And then I just became a challenge that I couldn't let go of. I will never put something in the book that isn't kind of right. I won't move things around. I won't make her be solving the murder if she was really meeting the Archbishop of Canterbury, because she was busy that morning. So that became really good fun. So usually if she's not actively solving the murder, then I'm making it as true to life as I possibly can. And if she is, I am totally making it up. And hopefully that's quite straightforward. So, you know, if she's sitting up in bed, well, I don't know. She's sitting up in bed writing her diary. She does write a diary. She does write it by hand. She does follow in the tradition of Queen Victoria. It won't be seen for, 50, 100 years to come. It will be left in the Royal Archives at Windsor Castle after she dies. So all of those things are true. But what she puts in the diary and what she's thinking while she's writing it, which is all about Putin and whether he had somebody murdered or not, I made up. But I think that's kind of obvious. So I don't feel that I'm working in the same sort of way as Peter Morgan. I think I've made life much easier for myself. You know, I'm not trying to, and not necessarily being totally successful at the moment, do a kind of documentary. It's just like authenticity with this mad fictional thing bolted onto it.
Because I guess the other question is you know, how do you feel about, you know, stretching the truth or how comfortable are you at stretching, you know, certain events to kind of make it fit around your plots?
Events, I kind of don't really. I make sure she solves the murder in the time when we don't know what she was doing. But people, the one thing I do change with quite happily is whatever I need to change to make it fit the golden age of fiction. So I don't think she is quite such a sort of twinkly, totally benevolent character. But she is in my books because that's what I want for that sort of vibe. So I changed things like that a bit. And I realize, you know, if I think somebody in real life would say something that my readers would find really offensive, naming no names, I will tone that down because I don't really want my readers to be offended in that moment. So I do find when I'm thinking about certain things at the moment, thinking I know what that person would say, but they're not going to say it in my book because that would just be unpleasant. So those are the kind of things I tweak. But I try not to make anyone do anything madly different from what they would do, apart from that kind of way.
I think that makes sense. So with this, what would you say the pros and the cons are of writing about the royals?
Pros are publicity. I mean, it's so easy to explain what you're doing because everybody knows them. You know, as I say, they've built my world for me. Bless their hearts. We all know kind of what it is that I'm writing about, which really helps. And I guess that is the fun thing is the readers and I are both having a bit of a laugh together about what if you could just step into those things, those stories that you read about. So that's easy. I mean, it might be difficult at times. Well, I'll tell you what, I would find it very difficult if I was writing contemporary stories because there would be a lot of things where I wouldn't want to go because of the way I write. So if I was writing it now, I wouldn't really want to write about any potential rivalry between Kate and Meghan. Because A, I don't know if that's true, and B, it's just unpleasantly prurient to try and guess. But I've managed. The reason I kind of set the book in 2016 was I wanted it to be recent, so I didn't have to do much historical research. You'll talk about in a couple of weeks' time. But also far enough in time that there was kind of closure on the things that I was writing about, so we know how the world feels about them, so that I could quite easily pick good bits and bad bits and what I wanted. And I find that that's helped me avoid difficulties. And if readers have, I mean, I have one friend of mine said, I asked her to interview me, funnily enough, for my podcast, and she said, can I admit I hate the royals? And I said, that's fine. It's not, it's not a prerequisite for reading the book. And actually, she said she really enjoyed the book by the end. But yes, I mean, if people want to read stuff that's really critical of the royal family, then this is not the series for them.
I agree. And I also agree that even if someone is maybe not a fan of the royals, I still think you could read this and get enjoyment from it because of the kind of the absurdity of the idea of her solving these crimes. It's so different that it's quite fun. Now, there's an interesting question in the chat from Bonnie. So she asks, how will you handle the Diana aspects in the 90s?
I saw that. Such a good question. I've been thinking about it. And originally thinking, I mean, as I've been saying, that will be really hard. It reminds me of something that I do try and do. So this is connected. I'm writing book 3 at the moment. It's set at Sandringham. And I thought, oh God, they'll go shooting, won't they? Suddenly I'm into massive controversy, which I've been trying to avoid. And same sort of thing. So I have to talk about the royal family shooting. And so I will have different characters that represent different aspects of the argument. So there will be people who are incredibly pro and talk about how much it provides employment in the countryside and it supports conservation. And there will be PETA supporters who just can't bear it and think that they are, just a bunch of hideous monsters running around the country killing animals. And probably with the Diana thing, I will have conversations where people are going, oh God, she's such a nightmare, and other people absolutely fighting her corner. I think that's how I'll cope with it.
I think that's important with all fiction, really. I think you don't necessarily want your book, anyone, shouldn't have their book be a thesis per se. It needs to be a story with opposing ideas so that the reader can then tackle with that, I think that kind of idea of having those opposing ideas and then walking away with the reader has to walk away with the decision of what they're going to agree with or not, is generally the way to go. So you kind of talked a little bit about this already, but the question is how much is fact versus fiction in the Windsor Knot, i.e. whether that's all the way down to the breed of the dogs, or the horse show in the 1940s, etc.
I'm so glad you asked that question. There is a scene where Prince Philip says that he's going down to inspect the horse show, which is being set up. And it's a special horse show because it is around the Queen's 90th birthday and horses are her thing. And so in that particular horse show, there were like nearly 1,000 horses and 1,000 riders, and it was kind of insane. So he says he's going down to see how they're getting on, and she says she'll go with him. And there's a conversation with the sort of works foreman, where Philip says, they don't have dogs anymore because a Labrador upset the tea tent and stole the king's chicken sandwich in 1944 or whatever year it was. And the Queen comes along and says, no, it wasn't a Labrador, it was a lurcher. And that is completely true. That was one of my horse and hound stories.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, in the 1940s, they did have the Windsor Horse Show to raise money for the war, and they bought 300 typhoons, which I think I've got in the book. And it was a lurcher that stole the king's chicken sandwich, and that's why they don't have dogs at the Windsor Horse Show.
I love that.
So, yeah. So
building off of that, what other interesting facts have you learned while researching this story?
One of my favorites was something somebody picked up on recently, actually. So, for example, there's a bit where, fiction, the Queen is in the private chapel at Windsor Castle, reflecting on the stained glass window that's at the back of it and how much it means to her. I have no idea how much it means to her. I can guess, but the window is accurate. So I've seen pictures of it, and it was created after the fire because the chapel was created after the fire. The original chapel was where the fire started, and Prince Philip takes a real interest in these kind of things. I mean, he's a real doer, and he loves design very much, and and he's an artist, and so he got really involved with the stained glass designer and what they were going to do. And you can see his original designs, and you can see how they were tweaked. And now the two of the bottom panes feature somebody rescuing a portrait and a firefighter, and I just. It's a very moving window, and so I really enjoyed sort of getting that kind of detail in there. That was a fun one, and also just the fire itself. We'd always talk about her annus horribilis in 1992, and it was horrible for her. But I mean, given where we are today, 21st of January 2020, that if you go through dark times, you come out the other side. And so 92 is hideous, and there's all divorces and other things going on. But as a result of the fire being so bad, they had to really rethink the finances so that they could get the money together to rebuild. And they decided the only way they could do it was to open up Buckingham Palace to visitors, which they'd never done before. I mean, they've done it to garden parties, but not paying visitors. Yeah. And so that's why visitors can go around it. Apart from, of course, now in the pandemic, they can't, and they're losing so much money, and it's very hard. And she's had to sack various very senior members of staff because, not junior ones, luckily, sort of senior ones, because she can't afford the fees. But sorry, I can hear my husband talking upstairs. So because of that, they ended up with sort of regular income that they could then spend on sort of tarting things up. Right. So Windsor Castle is actually smarter than it was before. It's better looked after. It's better restored. So it went back to better than it was before. I found that kind of really inspiring.
Yeah, definitely. Victoria asks a question. She goes, "Would you ask Camilla to read the book for her new Instagram book club?"
I would love her to. I love the fact she's doing this. I love the fact she's embracing her kind of social media presence and using it to get people reading. She gets a bit of a sort of shout out in book 2 as well.
Yeah.
Work. I'd love her to, but she won't. I mean, the book isn't totally kind to Prince Charles.
No.
So yeah, I mean, if she did, I would think that would be very, very magnanimous of her.
But at the same time, I do feel like, at least it seems that the royals can sometimes understand the piss being taken out of them a little bit.
Yeah.
I did just, for some reason, I was watching a couple nights ago, Bill Bailey singing "Happy Birthday" at one of the little birthday celebrations to Charles, and he was doing it with Robin Williams, and they were just taking the mick out of him the whole time, and they're laughing. So I think maybe, why not? She could read the book. I don't think it would be too disastrous.
I sort of privately reading it, I'd be really amazed if they aren't doing that. To be honest,
yeah.
Because I think you're right.
Yeah.
And I think they do have a sense of humor, and I know that people who know them have got the book, and I can't imagine that they haven't said, "Oh my God, you've got to read this," just to see what you think. So I think they are. I think they probably are, but I don't think anyone will ever let me know what they thought about it.
It would be incredibly fun to know.
Oh, Lorraine is saying the Queen Mother loved the spitting image version of her. I am not surprised.
So the novel is likened to Agatha Christie's Miss Marple. I'm not totally sure if I fully agree with that. I think she's a little bit sharper than Marple. No offense to Agatha Christie fans. But my question is, who you've touched upon it a little bit, but who are your literary inspirations for this series, and why?
It's so nice talking to fellow writers about this, because I can sort of put these names out there and they're not just names. Hello, everybody. I feel I found my tribe. So yeah, in addition to Rex Stout, my go-to writer growing up was Dorothy Sayers. So obviously aristocratic detective. Do you know, it's interesting because my Dorothy Sayers, my favorite is Murder Must Advertise, and I love Nine Tailors. Various ones, Whose Body is another favorite, but I hadn't read Have His Carcass for ages, and I just recently heard it, and it features a Russian, a young Russian who's sort of found dead in suspicious circumstances, and I thought, oh God, people are going to think that's where I got that from, and no, I steal much from Dorothy Sayers, but not that. So there's him. And I mean, it's actually not Marple, but Poirot. I read all the Poirot short stories in this year of failure.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find out what Agatha Christie's secret was. I mean, don't we all? And what I found was it was massively liberating, because I was interested in all sorts of bits of technique. So, is it first person, third person? Is it point of view of detective or sidekick? Is it past, present, future? And she not only breaks the structure rules, she breaks all of those rules as well, or rather she just makes them up and changes them. So everything, she's done a first, she's done a third, she's done a present, she's done a past. And I just felt that was fantastic. So if I decide that I want to play about with the way that I have done it in book 1 and do it differently in a different book, then I sort of feel that she's given me permission to do that.
Oh,
so that's what I love about Poirot. It's not like getting everyone in a room. I must say that the thing that the book has that I don't think stolen from anyone is that because the Queen is a secret detective, as you know, she never announces who did it. She has to get someone else to work out who did it. And in book 1, I made it so complicated for myself because I decided to do one of those classic things where there's a point where the detective knows, but funnily enough, they're not telling you. And so I had to set it up that the reader could follow, and I hope I've done this okay, but the reader had to follow the Queen setting up someone else to solve it without the reader knowing for sure what the Queen was doing.
Right.
And then there's the denouement, which took me a month, even though it's a chapter, where the person comes back to her, and because they're with the police, they can go into a lot more detail than she ever could, and they can add things that she didn't know. And she sits there going, gosh, well done, you splendid, marvelous. So that's fun. But yeah, I'm trying to think who else I've got. So I wrote these down somewhere to remind myself. Dorothy Sayers, Poirot. No, I've lost my list, but it's kind of golden age people. Oh, actually, no. And Kate Atkinson is another one, bizarrely, but capturing contemporary themes. I just admire her so tremendously. So there's odd bits of Kate Atkinson in there too.
Yeah. So the next question that I have is, and again, we've kind of touched upon some of these, but so this is set in 2016. I'm curious as to why 2016. What was it about that particular year and not 2017, or during her was it Diamond Jubilee, the most recent one? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think so.
That one, 2012.
I got lucky. I was intended to be as lazy as possible. So it was like it was a vague year that wasn't quite now. So I was doing this in 2019 when I really kind of got down to it, I suppose. So 3 years ago, as I said, it was this business of, it was far enough back that we knew what had happened. It wasn't, there weren't still open questions. And I landed on 2016 without really thinking about it. It was just like 3 years ago, what the hell, that's about right. Then it turned out it was her 90th birthday. And also it was a year when it was unproblematic for the royals. It was problematic for a bunch of other people, but not so much for the royals. She was just really popular. And that was another thing I wanted to do to start with, because I just didn't want to have to deal with other stresses apart from the murder. So I chose 2016 for that. And so basically, book one, the thing that happens is her birthday celebrations, of which there are many. And then I sat down to write book two, which is set 6 months later. And I thought, well, what am I going to do now? Because it's 2016, what happened then? And then it was like, oh shit, there was Brexit, there was Trump. It was like last year, but without the pandemic. And of course, the stuff, I mean, I'm sure everybody sort of finds the same thing. The stuff that makes you originally think, oh no, please not, ends up being the best material.
Yes.
So the atmosphere of book two is everybody had been getting along, and now suddenly they aren't getting along anymore.
Yeah. That is the meat. That is the stuff that's gonna attract people. That's the drama. That's when we watch The Crown. That's what we're looking for. We don't care when things are hunky dory. We like it when everything is falling to parts. So that's kind of leads into my next question a little bit. Is you want to, you're saying you want to kind of I don't know, tread lightly is the right way of putting it, but you want to be careful with some of the stuff that you have to kind of address as you go into the future from 2016. What aspects are you interested in exploring in around their kind of family dynamic? Does that ever kind of leak into the plot?
Well, I mean, it is so it gets into 2017. So it is when Harry is starting to introduce Meghan around.
Yeah.
And I am going to cross various bridges when I come to it about how I address that. And do kind of what I said before, I think, and give lots of different points of view.
Yeah.
So there's that. Trying to think what else. I mean the Harry stuff. The Andrew stuff is just not going in. That's really simple. I am not going there.
Yeah, I think that's smart.
I never was going to put him in. Really. I mean, he's in book one, getting really cross with somebody who's moving a chair. Yeah. And that's kind of it. In fact, he lives, as we know, really close to Windsor Castle, and he could have been in it a lot, but I didn't really want to do that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think something that people are saying a lot at the moment is be kind. So I'm finding if I can't be kind, then I step back, and I can't be that Andrew, so he's not there.
Yeah. I think that makes perfect sense. You have answered this question already, so you kind of talked about how this is going to be a series of novels, and they're going to kind of go into the future and also go into the past. But one of my questions I was really interested in asking was, obviously, were you going to set some in the past? And you said yes, the 80s and the 90s. What is it about that era of the Queen that excites you? And take that one.
Two things: Ronald Reagan and Diana. So I think she got on really well with the Reagans, fellow horse lovers. She'll go to America. She'll get involved with American horse racing. I'll sort of do a Dick Francis set in Kentucky with the Queen typey thing.
Yeah.
I don't know very much about horses, so that will require a lot of research.
Yeah.
And then yes, the Diana glamour I think will be really fascinating. But actually, I'm most looking forward to the 50s and 60s. I think.
Okay.
When the Queen was, you know, freshly touring, and she had Britannia, and she was, you know, young and active and really traveling around. So yes, I'm looking forward to those. And the origin story is set in probably 1939, I think.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I mean, the blurb says it's her coronation where she starts to do this, but actually in my mind, it's around the time she meets Prince Philip for the first time, and war is brewing and abdication crisis, and there's all of that going on. So I think that's where I'm going to go.
So what inspired? Because what's also fascinating is this series is taking an interesting progression in that it's timeline wise it will kind of shoot forward for a little bit, but then it's going to start shooting backwards. Was that something you always wanted to do?
No, I think it's mad, but it's just kind of the way that it's worked out. I'm really happy with it. No, I knew that I wanted to do many. I knew I wanted to start in 2016, and I didn't really have a plan beyond that. And then it's just gradually evolved into this thing of, if I am going to go back in time, then why not sort of go back in incremental stages? But I don't know when I'll do the origin story. I'll probably just fit it in and amongst other things, I imagine. Yeah. And I want to do a short story called The Most Dangerous Woman in Europe, because in 1938, Hitler called the Queen Mother the most dangerous woman in Europe. And I just think it's so cool.
That is a really good deal.
She was kind of cementing relations between the UK and France, and that was doing him no favors. So. Yeah,
no. So Paul makes a funny comment, or maybe he's not being funny, I'm finding it funny. But he says you could have Prince Philip as a secret rally driver.
I guess I could. I mean, the thing is, Prince Philip may have his own secrets, but he doesn't know that the Queen's doing her thing. But I mean, she could always discover that he's got a secret thing going on as well. As long as it sounds as if it's authentic and it could fit in with what we do and don't know, then yeah, I'm up for ideas.
Yes. Now I know from social media that you did send the Queen a copy of your book, and they did write back to you. That's very nice. How did that feel? I don't
have the envelope with me. That's such a shame. I could have shown you. Well, so I sent it to an assistant private secretary, and he wrote back to me saying, "Thank you for sending your thing."
Yeah. Did you like leap out of the house, like rocket out of the house with excitement?
No, I didn't. No. I was very thrilled to get the postmark, and I opened it very slowly and carefully, thinking, is this going to be a very polite, you know, on the fence kind of thank you very much for your thing, or is it going to be more? And it was very polite, thank you very much for your thing. So it's like, okay.
Oh, that's really awesome. So is there anyone else within the establishment that you want to write about or potentially do like a spin-off in the future?
Well, that's interesting, because you told me you were going to ask me this, and my original thought was no, not really. She's the one, and then I thought, well, maybe Charles, possibly that could be interesting. Camilla, yeah, that would be fun. She's a fun person, so yeah. And then I thought, I know what I would really want to do. Princess Charlotte. I am a massive, just stupid Princess Charlotte fan. I think she's amazing. She keeps on cropping up in the book with the Queen thinking they look alike, because I think they just look unbelievably alike. Yeah. And I know she's a teeny weeny thing, but by the time I finish my quadrilogies, she'll be in her early 20s probably. And then she can go and solve crimes. And
I like that. So would they? I guess the funny thing would be, are they all solving crimes and they don't know the other people in their family are solving crimes? Or...
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think that's what will happen. Oh, I've just seen somebody saying, will you have the Queen meet any prime ministers? I'm having such fun in book 2 with the Queen talking to Theresa May in Balmoral in the summer of 2016. And being so relieved, because Theresa May said, you know, we're not going to have any more general elections or anything. And the Queen thinking, phew, well, we don't want any more of those. Little do they know. But I am annoyed, because I had Prince Philip really riffing on the fields of corn thing. And then I discovered Theresa May didn't say that for another year or so. So I can't have it. And I'm so cross. Yeah. I could cheat and put it in anyway, but I'm trying to be rigorous, as I say. So I
Unless he doesn't realize that she didn't say it.
Unless
like,
he's telepathic and he knows what she's going to say when the general election comes.
We're kind of winding down with the questions now, but another question is when you have the character of Rosie, and there is the one question kind of lingers in my mind is, you know, the queen is very, she is a very older lady. What happens when the queen is no longer around and Charles becomes king? Is Rosie going to hang around? Will she influence a new monarch, or will that be the end of the story? Does the story end with the queen, even if some of her family kind of continue these little adventures?
Well, for me at the moment, because I'm so interested in going back in time, once I've got them to 2017, that's kind of me done. I might well change my mind, but you know, from 2017, I go to 1995 or something.
Right.
So that won't be an issue. I mean, talking about when she's no longer around, I mean, basically at that point, I become a historical novelist, I guess.
Yeah.
I think because I'm always writing in the past anyway, so that doesn't particularly affect things. I mean, I will be extremely sad, but
of course, yes.
But I will still want to sort of mine this life that we know about for
I guess that's another really interesting aspect of this particular series, and off the top of my head, I can't really name one that does it in this particular way, and that you are writing contemporary crime fiction, but eventually this thing will become historical crime fiction because of the way you've done this, which is, I think it's quite fascinating. I think that's going to intrigue a lot of readers. So yeah, well, again, you've done this a little bit, but give us a bit of a tease for the next book, which is A Three-Dog Problem, which I find to be an absolutely great title and a great riff off of a three-pipe. I'm assuming a three-pipe problem. I mean,
yes, you see, you know. Absolutely. Some people are going to get it and some people aren't going to get it, but it's a three-pipe problem. I just thought it would be really funny. Sherlock Holmes smokes three pipes. The Queen takes two doggies and a corgi for a walk around Buckingham Palace whenever she's got a really tough problem to solve. It's based on, I mean, again, visiting. So I'm really fascinated by the fact that Buckingham Palace has a swimming pool, internal, and it also probably has tunnels going to the other palace complex next door. So I thought two great places for bodies, basically. There have to be bodies in these, a body in the pool and a body in the tunnels.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And when does it come out? When does book 2 come out?
It comes out in November. I'm really lucky with my UK publisher because he's into getting these out as fast as he can. So it's done, and hopefully I'll get the edits soon. And it's already on Amazon. People are buying it, which scares me a bit because it hasn't been edited yet. It has a cover, you know. You can buy the audiobook, which hasn't been recorded yet. I don't even know who's going to do it. So yeah, it's kind of scary but nice.
Yeah. No, it's because I've noticed that as well. There's you know, the first one came out and then almost instantly, bam, you're hit with the tease for the second one. But that's exciting. Well, Sophia, thank you very much. I had a lot of fun. Are there any questions in the chat? Does anyone, Gaynor says Olivia Colman? Oh, I'm assuming she means to read. Would you want her to read?
I think a lot of readers would enjoy that because they know her voice as the Queen's voice, but I haven't really seen the Olivia Colman series so seasons, I guess. So I don't know. I mean, Samantha Bond is doing them at the moment, so she would like to carry on. She's very welcome to. I mean, there are so many of the Downton actresses who would be good. One of my original kind of go-to people was Joanna Lumley because I just love her voice. So that's another thought. Who knows? Any other questions before we bring this to a conclusion? Give people a few more moments. No, I really liked Samantha's reading. I know we've talked about this a few times, but I thought she nailed it really well. And I think one of the questions we spoke about, you wondered if she nailed the humor, and I think she did. I laughed a number of times during her reading. And it's because it's the Queen. The Queen, she's saying these things and she's reacting to these situations, and
she's being quite human when other people around her are acting like she's not human. And that conveyed really well. But yeah, cool. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, so our first reader is Louise Hare. And Louise Hare is a London-based writer, and she has an MA in creative writing from Birkbeck, University of London. Originally, she's from Warrington, and the capital is the inspiration for much of her work, including This Lovely City, which began life after a trip into the deep level shelter below Clapham Common. I didn't even know there was such a thing. No. This Lovely City was featured on the inaugural BBC Two TV book club show, Between the Covers, and it has received multiple accolades, securing Louise's place as an author to watch. So Louise, you're going to read from that book, is that correct?
That's right. So This Lovely City, which is out in hardback at the moment, but it actually comes out in paperback 2 weeks today. So if you prefer a paperback, you don't have too long to wait. So it's a murder mystery set in South London, sort of across 1948 and 1950. So it's kind of a Windrush novel set in Brixton. My main character is Laurie. He came over on the Empire Windrush. When the book starts, he's sort of 2 years into his new life in London. He's had a few teething problems, but he's finally sort of got everything together. So he thinks he's got a job as a postman. He works as a musician in the evenings. And he's fallen in love with the girl next door. So the bit I'm going to read is just from the end of the first chapter, which is when Laurie makes his the terrible discovery that kind of sets the rest of the events in place. On this cold March afternoon, only the odd dog walker had ventured out. At this time of day, he often saw these middle-aged women with their precious pets emerging from the large houses that surrounded the common to walk their pampered animals in circles. Their children were grown and their housework managed by a housekeeper or a child lady, someone like Mrs. Coleridge, who did for a family over on the north side. They came striding along with an entitlement that Laurie would never possess, letting their dogs off the leash and looking the other way as their beloved squatted and left the mess for someone else to step in. Just before he reached Eagle Pond, Laurie looked up and saw one such woman coming towards him, veering to one side as she walked briskly down the centre of the path. There was a Jack Russell trotting along at her heels, and if Laurie had learned anything in his postal career, it was to watch out for those little bastards. The woman stared as he rode past, and he knew that if he looked back, she'd be watching him, making sure he kept moving and didn't hang around like a bad smell. The lady who answered the door at Englewood Road was no better. Barely 2 words to say to him, neither of them wasted on thanks, but the money felt comforting in his pocket. Laurie's cut was 20%, bargained up from 10 the year before. Derek needed a trusted delivery man, he'd argued, someone who didn't look suspicious knocking on a door and handing over a brown paper package. Who better than the local postman? Maybe he should take Evie out, he mused. Not just to the pictures. The boss of the club where he'd played the night before, he'd mentioned a few times that he'd get Laurie a good table if he wanted to bring his girl along. Laurie always smiled back and thanked him for the offer, said that he'd let him know. He wasn't sure what he was wary of. There was no shame in playing music for a living. It wasn't as though Evie didn't know what he did, but he liked that she was separate from all that. The women who frequented the club, not all of them, but a few, they reminded him of his mistakes. They reminded him of Rose. He cycled back the way he'd come, recognising the woman he'd seen with the terrier as he drew close to Eagle Pond, but the dog was nowhere to be seen. There was something strange about the way she was moving, and he found himself slowing down. She was pacing up and down in front of the pond, looking for something. Her gait was lopsided, and when she drew closer, he saw that her face was wet from tears that were blinding her. She didn't notice Laurie until the last moment, suddenly aiming towards him and coming up short as she took him in properly. She held herself rigid, her mouth gasping for air that her lungs didn't seem to want to accept. Ma'am? Laurie swung his leg and dismounted, making his movements slow so that she didn't spook. You all right? Can I help you? She looked over her shoulder but turned back to him, fixing her eyes on his uniform. Whatever she'd seen was more frightening than one skinny black man, and there was no one else in sight. You're a postman? Her tongue tripped as she spoke. Yes, ma'am. Do you need help? She nodded and pointed in the direction she'd come from, a ragged sob creasing her body. He couldn't see anything out of the ordinary at first. There was the pond, and there he spied the terrier. The small dog was soaked through. Barking urgently at him, it ran back towards the water. The pond. The woman squeezed out the words, and he noticed now that her hands were filthy, her coat spattered with mud. There's something in the pond. It was useless. She'd begun to shiver, her teeth actually chattering as shock took hold. Laurie laid his bike down on the grass and headed towards the pond on foot. The dog was still barking in a fury, running laps between the edge of the pond and the path. What you got, boy? The dog splashed into the water, checking back to make sure he was being followed. There was a bundle there, a dirty blanket that once had been white. Laurie crouched by the edge next to a smaller set of footprints that must have belonged to the woman. It didn't look like much, this wad of sodden wool, but that didn't stop fear from squeezing his chest tight as he reached out with his right hand, the palm of his left sinking into freezing mud as he tried to keep his balance. He strained his arm and caught an inch of fabric between two fingers. Pulling gently, the bundle moved closer and he grabbed a tighter hold. The wool was heavy with water. White and yellow embroidered flowers peeked out from beneath the pond fill. Daisies. When he lifted it, the bundle was heavier than he'd anticipated, but it wasn't the weight that sent him crashing to the ground, only sheer luck landing him onto the bank rather than into the water. His heart pounded his ribs so hard that he glanced down at his chest, expecting to see it burst out through his coat, scattering buttons onto the ground. The blanket lay there on the grass, the bundle coming apart. A baby's arm had escaped, along with a shock of dark curly hair and a glimpse of a cheek. It could have been a doll, but one touch had been enough to convince him that it wasn't. The hand was frozen stiff, but the skin gave as his fingers had brushed against it. Someone had left a baby in the pond to die, a baby whose skin was as dark as Laurie's. Thank you.
Wow, very powerful. Thank you, Louise. That was wonderful. Really appreciate that. And would anybody like to ask Louise a question or comment? We see wonderful comments all in the chat there. People are awesome and many others. Yeah, someone pointed out very atmospheric. I mean, you really captured a place, a time, and very different types of people. And you did it so beautifully. I mean, wow, I feel like I really see everything you were saying so clearly. Someone said they felt the freezing mud. Anyway, so that your book is about to come out in paperback, is that right?
Yeah, so on the 4th of February. So yeah. If your post is as slow as mine, you could probably order it now and it might actually reach you by that date. So.
Right, yeah. Wonderful work. Thank you very much for sharing that. And are you working on the next novel now?
Yeah, actually, if you do get the copy of the paperback, it does have the first chapter of the next novel in there, which is, again, a murder mystery, but a lot more, I guess, in the sort of Agatha Christie-ish vein. It's 1936, set on the Queen Mary ocean liner, and lots of gruesome murders happening. So
different protagonists, though?
Completely different, yeah. So there are a few common themes. I've got music in both books, but yeah, completely different.
Are you a musician yourself?
Sort of. I used to be more. I've got out of the habit. I used to play piano and I play clarinet a bit, which is why. So Laurie, my main character, he plays clarinet. So I did want to include.
Oh, great. All right. Well, thank you very much. What's the title of your book that's going to come next?
So it's not been announced yet, but it should be called, unless someone vetoes it, Miss Aldridge Regrets.
Well, thank you very much. That was wonderful. All right, thank you. So that was Louise Hare. And now we have coming up next, and tell me, Liam, if I'm saying your name correct, McIlvanney, is that right?
That's fine, yeah, McIlvanney, yeah.
McIlvanney, sorry, McIlvanney. Liam McIlvanney, hello. And he's coming in from way far away, New Zealand, but obviously not from there originally.
Oh,
And Liam was born in Scotland, studied at the Universities of Glasgow and Oxford. He's written for numerous publications, including the London Review of Books, the Times Literary Supplement, and the Guardian. His debut, Burns the Radical, won the Saltire First Book Award. His second novel, Where the Dead Men Go, won the 2014 Ngao Marsh Award. I never can pronounce her name right. For Best New Zealand Crime Novel. His most recent novel, The Quaker, won the 2018. Oh no, say it again, please, for me.
McIlvanney.
McIlvanney. I should be able to pronounce that. McIlvanney Prize for the Scottish Crime Book of the Year. And he's the Stewart Professor of Scottish Studies at the University of Otago, New Zealand. He lives in Dunedin. Is that right?
Dunedin, yeah. Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. God, with his wife and 4 sons. Anyway, Liam, welcome. And what book are you going to be reading from today?
Yeah, I'll be reading a short extract from The Quaker, Bonnie.
Okay, and can you just tell us a little bit more about the book before you say?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention to Sophia that there was an assassination attempt on the Queen in Dunedin in 1981, which is an event that not too many people know about. We're not that keen to publicise it, as you might expect. So there might be a possibility for you to set a book in Dunedin further down the line in that series. It's also the school holidays, the summer holidays here, so please ignore any bedlam that develops in the background. So The Quaker is, I suppose, a sort of historical thriller set in Glasgow in 1969. And it's loosely based on the real life Bible John murders that took place in Glasgow in the late 60s. The bit I'm going to read is I've got 3 chapters in the book that are told from the perspective of the murder victims. So I'm just going to read the first part of a chapter that's told by the second murder victim, Anne Ogilvie. The funny thing is, I remember the posters, not the posters of him, those came later. The posters of her, Murder, Did You See Her? With the Daily Records logo at the top and a smiling photo of Jacqueline Keevans and the telephone numbers to call the police. She looked so happy and oblivious in the photo, on the plain side too, God forgive me, not a looker. I remember thinking that she'd gotten herself into something she couldn't get out of. And when it came out that she had a husband and a kid, your first thought was, well, what is she doing at the dancing? Even though they were separated and the husband was living in Germany, that's what you thought. If she hadn't been out gallivanting in the first place, none of this would have happened, as if she was to blame, not the man who raped and killed her, but the mum who went out for a dance. So why did you go back? That's the question, isn't it? Why did you go to the Barrowland? Did you never think about the woman who died? Well, here's the thing. You knew she'd been dancing at the Barrowland. You knew that she'd met her killer there, but the Barrowland was local. It was our dance hall. It was where, don't laugh, we felt safe. We weren't about to trek all the way into town for the Albert or the Locarno. And we even felt that the Barrowland was safer now that this had happened. Well, he won't try that again in the Barrowland, was the feeling, like lightning wouldn't strike twice. Plus, if I'm honest, it gave a little thrill to the proceedings. We'd joke about it in the ladies, pretend that we'd spotted the Quaker, that the bloke who asked us up for the slow dance had a look of the poster about him, overlapping teeth, stripy tie. We'd even josh the blokes we danced with. Your grip's a bit tight there, Jim. Watch your hands. Are you sure you're not the Quaker? You'll never know. They'd fire back with a flash of their teeth. You'll never know until it's too late. I lay there all the next day, all the next night, 100 yards from my kids, from my sister Deirdre. It was Deirdre who finally found me. I heard her heels on the bare wood boards, footsteps coming towards me in fits and starts, as if she couldn't make up her mind. Then the gasp as she saw my legs and how she tiptoed over the last patch of floor and her scared face peeping into my dead eyes like someone peering into a well, the white plume of her breath in the cold room. 36 hours earlier, I'd been getting ready to go out. The boys across the landing at Deirdre's and Louise sitting in the bed, watching me put my face on. Will there be shows? Louise was saying, down in Irvine. I could hear the kids playing in the back court, lassies at their skipping games. 8 o'clock is striking. Mother, may I go out? My young man is waiting to take me round about. I suppose so, I said to Louise, in the summertime anyway. She always loved the shows, her mouth a wide pink blur as the waltzer whipped her round, her high laugh rising past the blue electric crackle as the dodgems jolted her shoulders back. Candy floss, toffee apples, a goldfish twitching in its plump, clear bag. I think she associated the shows with her dad. Her dad used to take her before he left, day trips to the Ayrshire coast, fish and chips and double nuggets and the sea breeze through open windows on the train home. Louise went and stood with her back to me, looking out the window. He will buy me apples, he will buy me pears, he will buy me everything and kiss me on the stairs. What's the uniform like? I bet it's brown and yellow or something. I bet it's boggin. Her new school was to be Irvine Royal Academy. It sounded posh, like some fee-paying high school in Edinburgh, but it was just the local academy. The boys would be starting at the primary in the scheme, Ravenspark. What will you miss, Mum? She looked at me over her shoulder. I smiled at her in the mirror, raised my elbows and gave a little shimmy with my hips. The dancing, I told her. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Liam. Wonderful. Really wonderful. So can you tell me a little bit about the structure of this book? Because you are narrating in the, as you said, in the voice of one of the victims. How did you come to that idea to do this?
Yeah, so it's mainly just told in the third person. But I interpolate these 3 chapters from the perspective of the murder victims. And that was just partly because it's my first 2 books, all the victims were male. And this was the first book in which I faced that slightly familiar, queasy scenario of, you know, the victims are the murdered women and all the agency rests with the male detectives. So it was just a way, I suppose, to give a sense of the kind of interior life of the victims and sort of shows something of their reality beyond just their status as victims. So, I mean, it's just stolen basically from a number of sources. I mean, Alice Sebold uses it in the Lovely Bones. There's a New Zealand novelist called Rosetta Allen who has a book called Purgatory, which again is narrated from Beyond the Grave. And there's a few other examples. But I found those sections quite liberating to write. They were sort of separate from the kind of tight economy of the police procedural and the development of the plot. I could just sort of kick back a bit and sort of enjoy exploring these characters.
Thank you. It was wonderful. There's been comments on the side. People have loved it. They love the point of view. Someone just said, I just had a mini trip to the beach.
Excellent.
Terrifying. And then anyway, so thank you very much, Liam. We appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
Great.
Now, let me just see. Now, Sam, are you planning to read tonight? Because I'm a little unclear. Are you there, Sam? Sam Blake? There you are. Yes, so are you going to be reading for us? Excellent. Okay. Sam Blake, her debut novel, Little Bones, which came out in 2016, was #1 in Ireland for 4 weeks. It remained in the top 10 for another 4 and was nominated for the Irish Crime Novel of the Year. It launched the best-selling Kat Connolly trilogy. And then her next novel, Keep Your Eyes on Me, went straight to #1 in January 2020. And The Dark Room is her latest release. Will you be reading from The Dark Room? Oh, excellent. And I couldn't hear you, but I guess you're there.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I just wasn't speaking. I'm speaking.
Okay, I just want to make sure there wasn't a sound malfunction. Okay. And can you tell us just a little bit about the book before you begin your read, please?
Of course. So The Dark Room is set in West Cork. It is the story of 2 ladies who meet there. Rachel Lambert is a film location scout and her partner Hunter is a documentary director. They both live in London, and Hunter's making a documentary about a chap called Alfie Bowes, and Rachel, various things happen. Their houseboat's broken into, and then Hunter's knocked off his bike and Alfie disappears. And Rachel then wants to discover more about his background. And so she discovers a link with a place called Hare's Landing, which is a country house hotel in West Cork. And that's where she ends up with Jasper, who's their dog, who is an ex-police dog. And the other lady is a lady called Caroline Kelly, who is a crime journalist from New York. And she goes to Hare's Landing because she's just desperate to get away from her job in New York. There's a legal case hanging over her and she needs a break. But when they get there, they discover that the house has its own secrets. And as well as trying to track the story of Alfie Bowes, they end up getting caught up in all sorts of things. And it's quite spooky. There are ghosts in it, ghostly goings on. But I'm just going to read you the very, very start of it. It's actually only 99p on Kindle at the moment. So if anybody wants to help me give it a boost up the charts, I would much appreciate it. So basically this is the dark room. I'm just going to read you just a tiny bit from the prologue. But there's just a quote right at the very beginning, which is, "The dead may be invisible, but they are not absent," from St. Augustine. So this is the prologue. Alfie's hand shook as he slipped the letter into the mouth of the postbox, his bitten nails black against the cream of the envelope. He hesitated, holding it on the cold cast iron lip, glancing behind him, checking the road again. The traffic was almost stationary, lights dazzling. He looked in the opposite direction to the column of blazing red tail lights. Safe, for now. Above him, the ornate clock on the station tower clicked on another minute. The letter was thick, his spidery handwriting spread over many more sheets than he'd expected. Once he'd made up his mind and he'd begun, the whole story had come out, with detail he thought he'd forgotten. The smell of the car, the heat of the sun as they'd driven down from Dublin, the laughter. The roads had been so bad, winding and narrow, the tarmac potholed and loose, and no signposts. He didn't know how tourists found their way around the country at all. It was important to get the story right, exactly right. This could be his only chance. Things would spiral as soon as it was received, and everything would change. He'd ended up writing the last page in cramped letters, the ink beginning to fade as he squeezed his initials into the corner, AB, Alfie Bowes. It wasn't his name, but that's what they called him on the streets, and it had become part of him, like the violin he was named after, held firmly now under his arm. Still holding the letter poised to drop, he lifted his other hand, the carrier bag handle looped securely around his wrist, and shook back the tattered sleeve of his tweed overcoat. He looked at the illuminated dial of his watch as the minutes flicking past. He didn't know when the letter would arrive. Frank at the hostel had only had a second-class stamp, and he'd missed the post today, but it would get there eventually. And when it did, they'd know the whole story. They'd know what had happened. There we go. Very, very short. That's just the introduction. The prologue, and then in the next chapter, first chapter, we meet Rachel, who's one of the key characters, to carry the story forwards.
I want more.
I just thought I'd keep it really short.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you have such a beautiful way of writing. It just, it definitely draws you in.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, that's the idea. And yeah, it's set in West Cork. The blogger reaction and the reader reaction has been fantastic, actually. It's been #1 in Eason's, which is our big retailers, for the last 3 weeks, and which is very exciting. But yes, very atmospheric. So it'll take you to West Cork, even though you can't travel there.